what is the meaning of work for women? Now, Indian women work all day and every day. They work outside the home, in formal companies, on their own land, and for others in agriculture as wage labor. They work inside the house, they cook, they care for kids and the elderly and clean. They work on products for the market, but by creating them at home. That's why you call them home-based work. They work in communities during rituals and festivals to uphold traditions. You will rarely find a woman who will be prepared to work during Diwali or during any festival that is really important to her and her family and her community. She will not mind foregoing wage labor for that day, but she will uphold her tradition. They're not in binaries like paid and unpaid. This has become a very fashionable binary. You will read any United Nations document, it's talk about paid and unpaid, as though you can cut, there's a way to cut it across, you know. We don't do that. You know, Indian women just don't do things in these kind of silos. Care work and productive work go hand in hand. Care work is also productive work for us. When you care for your children, you're investing in a new generation. That's productive. Why is only work for the market called productive work? The reason why women don't participate in enterprise work for longer than 4 or 5 hours is because they consider care work to be productive work.
You know, if you're in an IIT and then you go through an IIM, you find people with a similar background, right? So finding a co-founder and finding an idol, you know, as an art student who has done an MA and an MPhil and has had, you know, is like yourself, who I think you were in Man Ki Baat updates as the women who inspire us. So to see that success despite the social media exposure is actually quite dwindling.
You know, it's interesting, and you had mentioned a challenge, and that's actually one challenge I had, which is that I didn't come from a traditional, background of management or rural management. I ended up going into the field of rural management. You're right. The alumni network is something I didn't have. And most of the people who were with me ended up in academia or ended up going abroad, etc., and which is something I also did. But then because I left the country, I did lose. I don't think there is a formula for this. My solution for this in rural areas has been that you have to bring the man in early into the work you do. Don't fight. The whole feminist discourse on fighting with your family, fighting with your husband, fight with your mother-in-law, everything is a fight, fight, fight. You know what you're going to do? You're going to alienate everybody. You're going to alienate your community, you're going to alienate your ecosystem, and you're going to be alone. I find that men are not so nasty. If you include them in your work, you just have to spend some time explaining to them, about what you do, how they can support. And men are great for you, especially in North India.
Namaste and welcome to all the viewers that have joined us today. Center for Indic Studies welcomes you warmly. Today we have with us Vanita Vishwanathan ji, who has been a development sector practitioner and social entrepreneur for over 20 years now. She is the former CEO of Udyogini, a non-profit that focuses on business services such as training, marketing support, financial linkages, and end-to-end solutions from mobilization to market for poor women in socially secluded areas of India. Prior to joining Udyogini in 2000, Vanita ji had worked with the World Bank in Washington, D.C., during which time she was instrumental in conceptualizing and spearheading the World Bank Institute promoted Women's Enterprise Management Training Outreach Program. Vanita ji did her MA and MPhil from JNU New Delhi and a PhD at the University of Texas Austin, US of A. Today she'll be talking about women entrepreneurs as balance sheet builders for planetary sustainability. She says Shakti in Sanskrit is empowerment, and women in India are the embodiment of Shakti. By this definition, women have the innate energy and agency that makes them empowered. In India, culture and traditions, women manifest Shakti in different ways that impact positively the social, economic, and environmental realms. In the social, their life skills of nurture, conflict resolution, keeping families together, and build community relations of mutual support and growth. In the economic realm, Indian women are savers. Women's Shakti exists in to balance out the assets and liabilities of family and society so they can be called the balance sheet builders. As a balance sheet builder, they keep themselves, their families, and communities encased in a mutuality and equilibrium principle that is operationalized through a judicious mix of market and care, work, as well as observance of cultural practices and traditions to reduce frictions in personal and community well being. So when we talk of women's empowerment, we must see their contribution as a whole, which is what builds a healthy society and a next generation investment. I welcome you, ma'am, and I request you to take over from here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Urjus. We appreciate it. And thanks to Indus University for having me here today. There's actually a lot of talk these days about the Nobel laureate in economics, the lady who won it for her to work over documenting over, I think, the work over 200 years. Yeah, the pay gap. But I have to say, this is the formal sector. The whole discussion has been around what happens to the pay gap between men and women in the formal sector. India is not really in the same position. It has not ever been in the same position. It is also unlikely to be in the same position because we are not such a, squarely industrializing country as the United States has been and the Western world has been. We have multiple, I think I would call it a combination economy. It's not even a mixed economy. Mixed sounds a little negative. In my view, it's a combination economy, which operates at very different levels. And all of it has to do with how cultural we are and how very strongly embedded in our own traditions and cultures we are in the way we view work. So I'm begin from that by saying, what is the meaning of work for women? Now, Indian women work all day and every day. They work outside the home, in formal companies, on their own land, and for others in agriculture as wage labor. They work inside the house, they cook, they care for kids and the elderly and clean. They work on products for the market, but by creating them at home. That's why you call them home-based work. They work in communities during rituals and festivals to uphold traditions. You will rarely find a woman who would be prepared to work during Diwali or during any festival that is really important to her and her family and her community. She will not mind foregoing wage labor for that day, but she will uphold her tradition. So this is actually a composite work picture for Indian women. And I'll talk a little later of why it contrasts with other kind of frameworks that we have inherited. And this defines their Shakti. Their Shakti is their agency to navigate through all of these different kinds of work. And they do this on a constant basis. Now, why is women's work likened to a balance sheet? In companies accounting, a balance sheet is a balance of assets and liabilities. And when they equal each other at the end of a financial cycle, it shows the health of the company. In a profit and loss accounting in a company, the success is measured by increasing profits over losses. It's a very binary thing. It is also known, though, even in company, even in business, that a balance sheet is a better measure for the health of a company than the profit and loss, which can vary from individual products within that company. Now, in family and community and society at large, the need is very much the same, which is to have an equilibrium in the society so we don't break. Women play the role of ensuring the balance sheet because enterprise is just one form of work that women engage in. The other forms of work are equally important. I described them just now to you. And they give them the innate qualities of nurturing of enterprise, nurturing of the family, nurturing of the children, nurturing of traditions, nurturing of many different things that women view as core to how they enjoy their lives. They don't just put up with it. They enjoy it. That is how they view it. And they are nurture for building sustainable assets. Enterprise, family, children, networks, traditions. These are all sustainable assets. They're all necessary for a society's well-being and for its balance sheet. Now, reducing the liabilities, what are those? Reducing conflict, poor mental and physical health of family, children, or any members of the extended community. We're always there to help other people. Breakdown of traditions which was, care work is part of tradition. Looking after families and looking after parents, looking after elderly is a responsibility that is part of our Indian cultural tradition. If you don't do that, there is some breakdown that occurs, and women generally come in to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, this is what ensures a societal balance sheet, where assets and liabilities are not mismatched, but are navigated in various ways by women to maintain the equilibrium of society. Now, how do they do this? They're known for their multitasking abilities. You ask any company why they would hire a woman. It's because they're able to do many things all at the same time. They're known for that. They're better at it than men are. Cooking while keeping one's eye on their children, nursing a child by embroidering a cushion cover. You go to any rural family or you go to any small house, you'll see them doing 2 or 3 things at the same time. So the work for the market and the work for the home are not actually separated. I have researched, and across this country, you will not find any woman willing to work on enterprise for longer than 4 or 5 hours a day, because she does have other responsibilities. They will not, this Nobel laureate has talked about long hours that the Western world expects in the formal sector for women. The reason women drop out is because they don't want to give up their nurture of care in the family. Now, what is India's cultural, structural, gender landscape based on this for women entrepreneurship? One is multi-livelihood and collectives. This is so very innate to our culture. Women in India, especially in rural areas, are mostly employed in the informal sector. Now, the in the informal sector varies. The estimates vary from 60 to 80%. That's because it's very difficult to measure it. They're doing multiple tasks. And not every piece of work, they do even within one day. They do some wage labor, they go to the fields, they do something else, they do some enterprise work at home. So this is all multi-livelihood. This is how the basket of income comes. That's the modern word.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
But women have always been gig workers. I think Dr. Vaidyanathan said one is that women in India, especially in rural area, mostly employed in the informal sector, right? There's 60 to 80% of them are in the informal sector, depending on who you read. It's also very difficult to measure, but it's approximately within this range. Agriculture is still the mainstay of enterprise and wage labor. They've gone beyond farming for self-consumption into markets. The distress times are managed by NREGA and some things for really poor women, which are labor for asset building in villages. Household enterprises and services and value add. to primary products and participation in bigger supply chains are also widespread. Now you're looking at multi-basket for incomes. And this has been the mainstay of how it is that the Indian informal economy has been organized. Now, this is structurally organized this way. It just didn't happen. It's the Indian informal economy has been increasing for the last so many years. And then I think the first time the word informal was used in somewhere in the 70s. So it is structurally done this way. And to me, it is structurally done this way because it is the most convenient way of organizing for women's work in the multiple ways that I have described, that they think of their work. Now, there are many more structural mechanisms that have been built on informal cultural networks. Self-help groups, for example. This is, there are at least 2 SHGs, maybe more per village. Now, this has, gone global. This has become a global phenomenon, India's SHG movement. Now, how did those SHGs happen? They were the embeddedness of culture within that. They were in the village. They used to come together for festivals. They used to do a lot of other things for festival. So microfinance was one part of what they were doing. And actually, the Karnataka is actually the originator of this, the idea of self-help groups and, the idea of loaning each other and so on. The structure of self-help was, microfinance was built on what was already culturally embedded relations, on which was built the finance. So the supply chains, the enterprise was all developed out of this basic structure that existed of women's networks. There are multi-purpose networks, they're economic, social, and cultural. And the reason they work as a network, as I said, is because not only their ultimate purpose, but their cultural embeddedness. Women share similar attitudes towards working for a healthy balance sheet. Okay, so when they are together, they have similar attitudes towards work. And because they share those attitudes, that's why some of these networks that were created work. I think we should remember that. SHGs don't work only because of microfinance. They work because women do connect to each other in other ways. Women are also savers and conservationists, not just for finance, but also of land, resources. You go to any part of India, you go to Himachal, you go to Uttarakhand. This is where natural capital is so common. Everything is done according to what was part of their cultural ways of saving water, saving the time, saving the resources they have. And, now we call them recycle, reuse, repurpose is the 3 main things mentioned these days. This is not new to women. This was always their mantra. So they're now able to create enterprises based on these principles. They are now an international sensation. And I think Dr. Vaidyanathan mentioned last time about the Goldman Sachs report that said women's savings can alone fund India's infrastructure. You don't need so much FDI. It's interesting that I had never heard this till Dr. Vaidyanathan mentioned it. I think more of this information has to go out. The third is the home-based format for enterprise. There's a reason why women like home-based work. And many of them just don't like factories. Even recently, I heard somebody said that, in Tamil Nadu, when factories were created, women said they're not coming to factories. When I have done craft work with women, they prefer to take the craft work home. And they'll bring it to the center to deliver it later. They'll come to the central place to pick it up. They'll deliver it to the place after they've done the work. But the actual production work takes place at home, because then they can do other things at the same time while they are working. So I'm saying that these are all now work from home has become a big fashion. Everyone is talking about work from home. It's become a demand in the formal sector. But women were always working from home in India. It was never new. And they were doing enterprise from home. So what is the implications of all that? One is the perception and measurement of work that we have to push forward in India for even global consumption. They're not in binaries like paid and unpaid. This has become a very fashionable binary. You will read any United Nations document, it's talk about paid and unpaid, as though you can cut, there's a way to cut it across, you know. We don't do that. You know, Indian women just don't do things in these kind of silos. Care work and productive work go hand in hand. You know, care work is also productive work for us. When you care for your children, you're investing in a new generation. That's productive. Why is only work for the market called productive work? The reason why women don't participate in enterprise work for longer than 4 or 5 hours is because they consider care work to be productive work. And this is something that we all have to, you know, the definitions of all of this, our conceptual understanding, etc., has to come into an international parlance in order to make this a little bit more of a balance sheet building, you know, operation. The ideology of industrialization is what, you know, has cut us all apart. We have been sliced into bits and pieces: left brain, right brain, handwork, you know, work for machines, etc. And, you know, values are selective based on the goods and services produced and their market valuation. This is what a GDP is. It doesn't consider the valuation of, you know, now it's not women's fault that if the national accounts do not consider care work as productive work. This is our problem. We have to get that done. Now, this is the GDP work is more of a profit and loss view. That is, it's fine if it goes down, you know, it's a loss. So you have to sacrifice in order to increase India's GDP. But the problem is, instead of that sacrifice, let's not make GDP a more inclusive understanding of the returns to society that women give. Investors, in fact, still use this for startups, and investment for women for enterprise is still a challenge because of that, because they still think everything has to do with, and you know, there, you know, you can ask any women entrepreneur, question she's asked is about, oh, will she get married? In which case, of course, then it's out. That means she's not going to spend the 12 hours on work that she was doing right now. She'll bring it down to 6 or 7. The fact that she might actually get someone else to help her is a separate issue there, but they're not willing to look at it. So there is always a bias in the beginning itself in terms of, this is the gender bias. So what is measurable is valued. Now it is not measured, so therefore their contribution in other ways is not measured, so it is not done. And, you know, so the second thing that needs to happen in terms of the implication is we need to have a composite valuation. An understanding of, you know, composite valuation. When I looked at the acronym, it is CV, and it's the CV of women. It is multiple. It's got multiple layers. It's got many different things. So composite valuation is actually a CV, and that's a society's balance sheet when this CV becomes the core of our measurement. When this is recognized, investment will also be structured according to women's CV. Family and community equity. Women's non-market work is taken for granted as being their work for nurture and sustainable societal asset maintenance. Women are fine with it. They're not complaining, I don't think. Once there is a CV, though, equity in the form of support from male family members will come. The thing is, we haven't actually projected it even to male family members in a way that they feel that their contribution will translate into a support for the balance sheet. All right. So I think they feel, okay, this is women's work. In some ways, the formal sector has recognized it by giving paternity leave and all the rest of it for care work. But that's still a financial calculation. The companies will only give it if somehow they have enough in their kitty that can afford this. For small enterprises, they will not be able to do this. They will put it as part of a cost, which then a woman has to bear, not a man has to bear. So now, unless you change the ideology of this, the ideology of industrialization, of an industrialized world, as opposed to the ideology of a combination economy, which is what I call it, we're not going to get that understanding in society as a whole about their contribution for ensuring that women's work is measured properly. That once you have a cultural structure understanding, like I've said, that has to go into policy. Once it is understood that India's societal structure and its component parts of economic, social, psychological, financial is culturally embedded, women's balance sheet capabilities will find its way into enabling policy for all types of women's work. Thank you.
That was wonderfully put, ma'am. Thank you very much for that. But I have a lot of questions for you.
Okay.
I want you to start by telling me the challenges you face as being a woman entrepreneur, and what exactly does it mean being the CEO of a non-profit organization like Udyogini?
Okay, the challenges I think face is that, see, once you're at the top of an institution, the expectation of a woman is much higher than that of a man. Okay, so you have to prove yourself in ways that men don't, because you're measured at the same level. This is why I say there is no composite valuation for you. There's only one valuation. So, they don't care whether you have done well as a mother. They don't care if you have done well as a wife, you've done well as a daughter-in-law, all of that. All those other roles are not, interesting. It's only you're the head of a company, you're head of this one. So then you're measured in that way. So that's one challenge. One challenge is it's not just a multitasking problem. It's also a task in your own psychological being. You're constantly thinking, oh my God, look at that other CEO. Man, look how much he's done. I need to be there. And then you're kind of thing. I'm afraid it's a little, I'm not saying I'm afraid. I'm glad it's changing a bit. There's a lot of focus on women at the top nowadays. So they are being brought to the forefront. That's because when I was being CEO, there was no social media. And there was not much of a television. There was not. So, I mean, if I was a CEO today, and at the age at which I was a CEO, it'd be a different picture in terms of even a projection of how, of yourself. So this is a good time for women to be CEOs, to be very honest. So the same challenges may not hold, but the second challenge remains, for example, that, I didn't have a co-founder. I should have had another person with me. I was alone at the top. And again, that's a learning that has come from the startup ecosystem now, which is that one person, is always hard. You need to have a partner who can, you can bounce off things, etc., and who can run things in your absence if for some reason you're not able to be there, whatever. So that's the second sort of challenge I faced. The third challenge I faced was I chose to work in really backward areas of India. Central states, Naxal-affected districts of Jharkhand, really, difficult things for women in parts of Rajasthan. So we picked these things, and that was part of the program that it was, and I chose to do it that way, head that program. But we did it that I now, if I had to do it again, I might not have picked everything to be so challenging. I might have picked a few things that might actually have a faster traction of succeeding than at the time that I had. And, that would have given me fewer sleepless nights, actually. So I think these are the three main challenges I faced, certainly. What was the other question? You had another question.
What is it like to be a CEO of a non-profit organization?
Actually, a CEO of a non-profit organization at that time was easier because there was money. there was money available at the time. Non-profits were getting it. Now it's a little harder to raise money. So, and there are also a lot of for-profit social enterprises that have come up who are all sort of running after the same, diminishing pie, if you like, of grant money. And I'll tell you this, that working in the hinterland, working for the poor, working for enterprise, working and all this, which is, by the way India has to go. There is no, we should be doing that. We are natural entrepreneurs. We tend to forget that we are natural entrepreneurs. We do it all the time. You know, it's not like something that came out of Harvard or anything of that kind. It's something we do all the time. Is that we build on it. And we need to have a combination of grant money as well as investor money. And we have to build investor education in the way I mentioned. We need to do our own mathematics and composite valuation. Economists from India, including women economists, need to sit down and say, what does this composite valuation mean? We had something called the social return on investment, social SROI. It was brought, nobody uses that measurement. It's not the greatest of measurements. But a composite valuation has to be measured. That is, how much are you, when you bring up a child and when you help a child with homework, if you're nutritionally benefiting a child, what is the future value that you are putting in of that child developing into a productive human being who can then innovate for your nation? We need to do this kind of a future valuation in order to justify our present investment in care work for children. I know we shouldn't have to do it. I know we are culturally embedded and we have a feeling like, you know, my responsibility, that apart, but the world has changed and there's no harm for us to actually make these numbers the way they work, the way they should.
Another question, ma'am, I was having in my head when you talked about social media is that even though there is social media, uh, entrepreneurs in general and women entrepreneurs included in that are usually seen to be coming from engineering backgrounds or they come from management backgrounds. But now I was the other day looking at IIM Indore's profile, batch profile, and there was an increase in the art student who are now coming into it. So I think you are an MA and MPhil yourself. Uh, I think coming from a background like that, it can be very hard to find a co-founder. You know, if you're in an IIT and then you go through an IIM, you find people with a similar background, right? So finding a co-founder and finding an idol, you know, as an art student who has done an MA and an MPhil and has had, you know, is like yourself who I think you were in Man Ki Baat updates as the women who inspire us. So to see that success despite the social media exposure is actually quite dwindling.
You know, it's interesting. And you had mentioned a challenge. And that's actually one challenge I had, which is that I didn't come from a traditional, background of management or rural management. Yet I ended up going into the field of rural management. You're right. The alumni network is something I didn't have. And most of the people who were with me ended up in academia or ended up going abroad, etc., and which is something I also did. But then because I left the country, I did lose the connections, what little connections I had left. And actually, some of the friends that I had were also left the country. So when I came back, I didn't have the connects to do this. So I had to fall back on my World Bank connections, by the way, incidentally. That's where I got the support I did. And many of those World Bank connections were from, connected me to other people in India. And that's how I ended up creating a little bit of a small ecosystem for myself that I could fall back on in terms of, and so I ended up with people with rural management, it supported, but they came through my World Bank thing because they worked on World Bank projects. So that's how that ecosystem got built. So it wasn't so bad as I had first started out thinking it might be.
So how did World Bank find their way to you, or how did you find your way to World Bank?
I worked there, and when I was in Washington, this project was very interesting. This project was an odd thing. It's not something that the World Bank normally does. And at the time that I was there, this project fell into my lap, basically because it was funded by the Japanese government. And the Japanese decided that they wanted to give it to the bank because of its credibility. They didn't want to give it to anyone else, and said that, please work in Asia and work with the nonprofit sector in Asia. That was their two mandates. And so it fell into my lap because I was the only Asian in that area, in that department. So, I mean, it basically was a pretty big project that fell into my lap and said, you do what you want with it. Now, can you imagine? I was so lucky. Basically, to be given something and told to do what you want with it, really, but just produce results, was one of those kind of, made in heaven uh, kind of opportunities that World Bankers don't get, because World Banker lends and it through governments and so on, you don't get these kind of things. But I was in a part of a bank in the World Bank Institute, which is a training arm, which is generally left alone by the main bank. They also then think that, we don't know what these people do, they're not to be counted. So I was fine not to be counted by the main bank, but to be counted in the countries where I worked.
Ma'am, there was a McKinsey report that came very recently about the impact that AI will have on the jobs. And of course, it is a reflection which has been made on the American economy. But their conclusion has been that it will affect women's job more so than men's job, for the simple reason that the high profile jobs like management or STEM jobs are going to have lesser impact of AI, but other sorts of jobs are going to have more an effect on that. Of course, that is an economy that is more formalized than ours. But is AI something that will empower the place of women in economy, or or is it something we should be worried about and maybe somehow find our way into STEM even more so?
A lot of what I'm reading on AI is a little bit of speculation and a little bit of guesswork. To be very honest, it's guesswork. I don't think any two reports actually agree on what is going to happen. And I think nobody really knows what is going to happen. But what I would say is, and this is the area that I'm working on right now with Jagriti, where I am, is increase women's exposure to digital. No matter what, you're going to have to do that. AI is one step beyond. Now, at least women should be able to access information. They should be able to navigate their way through knowledge, etc., resources that are online. If you're going to be working home-based and in remote, you need to have connectivity, and you need to find, this is what I meant by policy. Your policy has to be such that you have to blanket this country with very good connectivity in rural areas so that women can find educational resources exactly where they are. In places like northern India, in UP and so on, there are safety concerns for women, so they can't travel too far. So they're going to have to find knowledge resources exactly with a smartphone sitting where they are. So if anything, all the major telecom providers, in the country have to do exactly that, high end and great bandwidth. Right now, Jio and all that, there's a lot of talk about it. Jio might have cables there, but the bandwidth is pretty abysmal. As and when more and more people get on it, the bandwidth reduces. So we do have a huge demand for it, for bandwidth. So we need to invest in that. So that's a great investment for policy that has to make. And you will get knowledge resources on AI once you can access that on your smartphone. So that's for people like us who work in the nonprofit sector to help women access those knowledge resources and bring it to them. Because right now we are shooting in the dark because they don't know what they are. They can't even access it, the knowledge resource on the phone, because there's no bandwidth. So even if you tell them, it's difficult.
And it's such a lost opportunity because you see something like in Karnataka, because there is so much of culture that people are still close to, whether it be buying flowers in the morning to go to the temple or having a coconut water. All of these are, you have these street side stalls that are actually run by women. In fact, even cigarette stalls in Karnataka are run by women, for that matter. But the upper hand that Uttar Pradesh has, unlike Karnataka, is that it has an abundance of resources. So entrepreneurship can really flourish, of course, irregardless of gender over there. And I feel like for women over there, it's a missed opportunity. But what I wanted to talk to you about is because of the places that Udyogini took you to. Um, we have this great business story about Lijjat Papad. So, how many of is it a fluke? Is it a one-hit wonder, or are is that an opportunity, or is that a symbol of the potential that the women and their enterprise has?
See, Lijjat had several advantages. Number one, it's in Gujarat. Entrepreneurship is in their blood. Okay. And these are the women who started Lijjat on their rooftop of their home. Okay. And there is a very strong cultural connect amongst Gujaratis.
Yeah.
Okay. And they'll do anything for their community.
Mm.
And and that's true for not just women, it's also true for men. So this cultural advantage, see, that's what I mean. We tend to forget that there is an inherent cultural advantage in certain communities in India. And
Yes.
we need to mine those cultural advantages for enterprise benefit, for work benefit, by looking at all the embedded stuff that they bring into it. Now, Lijjat started like that. Then they were given support, and then it sort of went all over the country. Actually, I don't know too much about what's happening with Lijjat right now. I don't know whether it's all a thing, but because those women are now old, I don't know what happened. After that, the original women are not there. Now I
Mm.
know that it was taken. It was a company, and I don't know how it is being run. To be honest, I haven't kept in touch. But there are many Lijjat equivalents all over this country. There are many working now. I don't have a problem with pickle and papad making. There's a lot of, I mean, you mentioned STEM. If I can just for a minute, just keep STEM aside, and I say that there is a demand for pickles. The pickle industry is doing quite well from what I can tell. I haven't got the numbers, but it's doing well. The papad industry is doing quite well. It's just that it become an industry, but they're all home-based that supply to these industries. So what we need to do is strengthen women's ownership in these industries. I think what has happened is these industries have been taken over by corporatization, and the actual work of production, etc., that women did, they don't own that anymore. They just supply. So that we have to bring back women's ownership of this. And that's where I think the culture can blend with ownership, with business ownership. Is that stick to, if women enjoy papad making, theek hai. If there is a demand for it, make it. It's the same for pickle making. Now, as far as STEM is concerned, it's a slightly higher order. Though, Karnataka is a very highly educated state. That's why and it's also a big value for education, and that's historical. Okay, the kings of our dynasties and so on heavily encouraged education, and so every family, the focus was on educating their children. It didn't matter whether it was girls or boys. Even the girls did engineering, not just the boys. Now that is not there in the north. I mean, I lived in Delhi all my life, most of my life, but that focus on engineering for girls is a very South Indian thing. It's also a little bit in Madhya Pradesh, engineering, but it's beyond that in Rajasthan and all. Women and engineers, no. So it's a little bit of a awareness and a change in understanding that, because they're also afraid. There's a lot of protection of women that has again come historically because of colonization. In the north, there's a lot of focus on protection. We send women to STEM, they'll go out, they'll work in jobs, and then, what will happen, we don't know. So they have to work at it in from different sides.
Another question that I had for you, ma'am, was now this is below your intellectual capacity. Let me tell you that first. But this is an epidemic that is among the youngsters. So I need someone as venerable as yourself to give an input into this. There is something known as the manosphere. Okay, so these are American and UK based podcasters who say that a traditional woman is great. Now, a traditional woman in the Indian context is different, and for them it is different. A traditional woman's work is to support the man because the man is the upholder of the infrastructure of society. So they have some very funny ideas, but the idea which is most problematic is that they said that women shouldn't have had the right to vote for the simple reason that women never had anything to do with wars. Now, of course, that is wrong because when these men went and they died, it was us who have upheld
One
the
minute, one
culture.
minute. Sorry,
Yes, please
you
go on.
disappeared in
Oh,
between.
okay. Okay, I'll just start over again.
You just say
Uh,
what the podcasters say. Women shouldn't have had a right to vote. Why?
they shouldn't have had the right to vote
Hmm.
because they did not have any bearing on their contributions into a war. They weren't involved in wars, and that's why they should have never had the right to vote. So there is this one question that they keep going around asking that give me a woman equivalent of Elon Musk. You can't give one because women are just not as intelligent as men are. Now, this is a particular myth that I am asking you to bust, which I know is going to be, it's below your stature to answer such an elementary question. But I have to ask you to answer that because there are several young women who would love for you to answer it.
All right. No. Let's not call it below or above. It's fine. You think they went to war? How could they even qualify to be inducted into the military if women hadn't given them food to eat? If women hadn't cooked at home and made them physically eligible for military service, they couldn't have gone to war. So I'm so sorry. There is no argument here. Okay, the contribution of women to men's nutrition, if you like, okay, was pivotal in enabling men to be able to go to war. And who kept the hearth burning at home? Who looked after the children while men went to war? I mean, aren't children also the children of men? Yeah. Okay. And did you not invest in the looking after the children and brought them up in the next generation so that when the men came back from the war, they could look up to a child and be part of the child's life later while women had done all the basic work for bringing them up? A strange argument. Actually, I'm surprised anybody makes it even now. It used to be an old argument. I don't know why anybody's making for this up. The women's right to vote has come a long time ago. So I don't think anybody even argues that anymore. Then what was the other one you mentioned? Some other thing you said.
They say that women are not as smart as men because there
Yes.
is
Why
no
isn't there
female Elon Musk.
yeah. I don't know whether you want a female Elon Musk. Do you?
Absolutely
I
not.
don't think
I
I
don't
don't
think we
think
want one.
anyone. I honestly don't think everything he has done so far has actually failed out, to be very honest.
Hmm.
What has he done? Can someone show me something he's done a lot of things where he spent his money. Get me
Yeah.
see the Tesla. Yes, I mean I know the car and it's this one, but how much it costs, that Tesla, that car.
Hmm.
The amount. So I'm saying he's done that. And I know there's a solar powered smartphone that's coming apparently from
SpaceX.
from him. Yeah, and so on. Now the innovations he's coming, but my God, how much has he spent? okay, in order to get there. Now, let me also tell you this. I think we need to stop thinking that we need an Elon Musk for innovation. We don't. I don't even know why you need, let me ask you, if a smartphone which is solar powered, it will, right now it's going to cost a bomb because these are initial days. It might take a very long time before you can get it down to a level where most of India can afford it. I'm actually not bothered about Elon Musk because he doesn't live here and he's not Indian. Let him go. Let him be in America. I am so sorry. I am not so very concerned to be Elon Musk. What we in India need, and this is something to do with the kind of companies we need to create. We don't need huge things. We don't need behemoths. We don't need, I mean, people are talking about why can't we create a Google? How come Sundar Pichai is over there? I mean, that's not the argument. America is a corporatized entity. It is designed like that. Industrialization in America was designed for corporatization. The kind of thing in India, because of employment and the number of people in India who need to be employed, we can't afford corporatization. In India, most of employment is created by micro and small industries. So we need a blanketing of this country with medium-sized, with small and medium-sized industries that create a huge amount of jobs, but which are not behemoths. And they will operate at the cusp of formal and informal. And this is something I have advocated, that we need a hybrid of formal and informal. We don't need only formal sector work. We need the flexibility. The flexibility that Nobel laureate talked about women's time isn't going to happen with a formal sector, with a purely formal sector. By the time the laws catch up to you, by the time the politicians catch up, all of this is going to take a very long time. Right now, let's just structurally and organizationally design it that it's a hybrid model.
Lastly, just one question, ma'am, that if there is a student that are not into engineering or management, what path then could they tread to entrepreneurship?
So many sectors have opened up now. There is so much online you can do. I know enough people who have become artists who are selling that, making money, online. A lot of women, by the way, my daughter is a cinematographer and a painter. Okay. She's nothing to do with STEM management, nothing. And she's self-employed. And she is already on media trying to create a YouTube channel for herself so she can sell many of her things online. She'll go to exhibitions and sell, etc., etc. So I don't think there is any limitation in terms, as long as you research it and as long as you're able to be smart about it and that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, you do some 2-3 things together so that at least one of them will take off, you'll be fine. There's so many things you can do. Even in multimedia, you can do photography, there's videography, there's art, there's sculpture, there's painting. There's so much. In fact, we are teaching all this to our in our digital project in Uttar Pradesh, how to use some of the tools that are available there, Canva, this, that, and the other, to create your own content. And so much of these contents, are there now. So you decide what your passion is and you create your content around it. Yes, it will take you time. But the job situation, even with engineers, etc., is such that in manufacturing in India, okay, so services are great for it. Service sector is coming up for services, is also good for women. So I would say for young people, definitely explore the non-traditional options.
We will conclude this session with just one last question. How do you think husbands, sons, daughters, and other family members can be a little more supportive towards a woman's career?
This is, this is a complex question because I don't think there is a formula for this. My solution for this in rural areas has been that you have to bring the man in early into the work you do. Don't fight. The whole feminist discourse on fighting with your family, fighting with your husband, fight with your mother-in-law, everything is a fight, fight, fight. You know what you're going to do? You're going to alienate everybody. You're going to alienate your community. You're going to alienate your ecosystem. And you're going to be alone. I find that men are not so nasty. If you include them in your work, you just have to spend some time explaining to them, about what you do, how they can support. And men are great for you, especially in North India. Women cannot go out for marketing because of the safety issues. If you don't have marketing, you can't run an enterprise. Men and the boys do the marketing. Now, if you include them in your enterprise and they also feel like they are part of the earnings kitty for their enterprise, I don't see them opposing the career path that you want. And many of them now are become very smart. Fathers are definitely supportive of their daughters. I've seen this in UP, a state that everybody decries as being so backward. I've seen it in UP. And when I've talked to men, they said, just find us a way to ensure safety for women and we'll be completely supportive.
That is a very beautiful note to leave it on. Thank you very much, Vanita ji. I cannot begin to tell you how insightful this session has been. Truly inspiring. We learned so many things, and you have been a living example of walking the talk that you have delivered today. Thank you very much, and we hope to have many more sessions with you. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. This has been terrific. Bye-bye.
Thank you.